if you look at the community center, budget, only about 6 to 7% of those residing, in the only 6 or 7% of people in the villages use the Theater Young Community Center. The budget's about $5 million, and I think that but when you really think about it, if you have only 6 or 7% of the people in a community, outside in the villages using the center budget, what's going to happen is center programs. What's going to happen is there's going to be less support for the community center from residents of villages in the future. So I think if you put the community center in the A budget, there's not going to be a very active as many programs and as much community support, because a lot of people in villages are going to say, why fund it? They're not going to be as supportive. I've spoken to people in the villages, people in Dobbs Ferry, people in Irvington, people in Hastings, people in Ardsley. They don't use the center, and they're not going to want to continue funding the center.
Mr. Feiner stated that only 6% of Theodore Young users reside in the villages. While it's unclear whether or not that data is even accurate, Mr. Feiner uses the statistic as a reason to justify the villages not paying for Theodore Young. Mr. Feiner, if you were willing to cite the usage of Theodore Young, do you know the same stats for other social services that the villages do fund? And what, in your mind, is the right level of village usage of Theodore Young where you believe the villages should pay? Does Theodore Young get the same treatment in your mind as other social services? Actually, should usage even matter here at all? Irvington probably has a few residents on public assistance, but it still pays the county taxes to support programs for people who need them. Should we ask George Latimer to exempt Irvington residents from having to pay for those services? Whether or not we are individually affected by the forces of poverty, racism, or cultural deprivation, or even have ever set foot in Theodore Young, is irrelevant to the town providing the social services for those who do. You're saying that there was some data that you had that apparently you can't source that says 6% of people in the villages use Theodore Young. I would like to know from where you got that data. We just had an entire conversation with the town planner about how you were going to go and interview and gather information from the public about whether or not the change in zoning was problematic. Have you literally gone out and asked people in the villages using email list, notices, or anything? How many people have actually said to you, I am fine in paying for and supporting from our taxes developmentally disabled people and senior meals, but I have a massive problem supporting people who have had problems as a result of racism? I'd like to know who are those people and how many of them you actually supported, and where's the data to support your 6% argument? Greenburgh nor any municipality would ever have two entirely separate police departments, two entirely separate DPW departments, or two entirely separate recreation departments. If you finally change the classification of Theodore Young for what it actually is, Theodore Young would be entitled to the benefits of a sustainable revenue stream that would protect it from the competing budget needs of the Parks and Rec Department, the DPW, the Police Department, and of course, future village incorporations, Edgemont or otherwise. Look, it's never too late to make a positive change. The $19.3 million that all town taxpayers have on deposit with the town offers a historic opportunity to provide equitable funding to Theodore Young, an essential agency that offers critical services to some of Greenburgh's most vulnerable citizens. These types of services are not provided by the villages. While the villages have their own recreation department, no village in Greenburgh offers services comparable to Theodore Young's. Thus, the town's long-standing and disingenuous labeling of Theodore Young as yet another entirely separate recreation facility that a subset of the entire town uses is incredibly troubling, particularly in the context of today's national discussion. Up until now, you, the town board, have refused to discuss the matter because, according to Councilman Jones, The village's officials have indicated they really don't want their residents paying for such services. Really? That's the answer?